Hi, I'm Andrew Curtis of Irrigation New Zealand. Most irrigation schemes have now received their ratings valuation, and you'll note for most of you this has dropped considerably. INZ raised concerns with the Valuer General about the double dipping issue. They listened to us, and working in partnership, we have developed the Irrigation New Zealand Irrigation Scheme Rating Valuation Guidelines. Peter Seed, a specialist valuation consultant, explains the new methodology later in this short video. It's now up to you. Once your valuation is on the district valuation roll, it's for you to talk to your council and make submissions on their annual plan process as to how they strike their rates. A copy of the guidelines will soon be available on the INZ website, or alternatively, contact us direct and we'll send you a copy.
In dealing with the Valuer General on the interpretation of that. We don't actually have to change the rules, and that's why we published guidelines, or rather Irrigation New Zealand's published guidelines. And we've just been able to say, okay, well, we believe that that particular rule should be reinterpreted in this particular way, which means overall, for virtually all schemes, it results in a lower valuation going on to the district valuation role.
So, how have we changed the methodology from what's usually used?
Yes, we have. We've moved the methodology from what's called ODRC, or Optimised Depreciated Replacement Cost, to more one that's got an economic value test alongside it, and it's very similar to the way that most of the schemes would have had fair value tests done.
Yep.
So they would have had an annual fair value test done, where they've had a valuer come in and say, you know, does the income generated by the scheme support the asset value on the books? Answer yes or no, and they would come up with that kind of value. So all we've done is basically put a structure around that.
Hey, and one of the main concerns has always been this whole double dip thing, the fact that some people feel that the value of the infrastructure is already accounted for in the land value of the individual shareholder, and so therefore that the scheme shouldn't be rated. How does this methodology help deal with this?
Okay, there's a little bit of land economics here, and I'm trying not to dig too deep, but the issue's all around where the value of the scheme sits. And if, for example, the schemes charged a water charge which gave them a full recovery on capital, the fair value of the scheme would be the ODRC, it would sit about here. If, on the other hand, most schemes basically just have water charges that cover the interest and depreciation and operating costs. So when you take the present value of those, in other words, discount all the cash flows back, you end up with a value which sits down here. Yep. So this is the value that we're talking about the scheme being worth. Now, the difference between this, the higher value, and the lower value hasn't disappeared. Yep. It's actually gone across into the land value in the scheme. So we've been quite careful about apportioning that value, and that's been one of the critical processes. So we've been very, very specific about avoiding a double dip by saying this is the value of the scheme, the balance of it is actually in the land value, please don't rate them twice.
I thought it'd be a good idea to give you some idea of what we're talking about when we talk about this double dip idea. And for that, it's just probably easy to draw just a quick picture. If we were looking at the value of a scheme, there's a number of bits and pieces that go into that. You've got some plant and machinery, and then basically you've got the scheme assets, and they sit there like that. So you've got a total value up here, and that we'd call that the ODRC. All right. Now, the ODRC would be the appropriate value if the scheme was charging what we call its weighted average cost of capital, if it was charging a full rate of return that it should be. But in reality, what happens is the schemes generally charge something less than that. In fact, the schemes normally only charge enough to cover the interest and operating costs and a bit of depreciation. Now, when you take the present value of that, you end up with a lower value, and this is basically what we call the enterprise value, or EV. Now, the difference between the EV and the ODRC, well, where's that gone? Effectively, where that has ended up is in the land values of the land in the what we call the command area. Now, it's just a simple value transfer. Now, the double dip arose where they were valuing the schemes at this amount, and they were also valuing the full land value, including that transfer. What we've done by valuing it at the EV is we've made sure that the double dip doesn't arise, because we're assuming that the scheme value is only that one. A second point that's come up in questions is, well, what is this thing that's been called the ODV? Now, the ODV stands for Optimised Deprival Value, optimized deprival value, because it's what you would pay if you were deprived of the asset. In other words, what's the asset worth to somebody that's going to come along and basically pick that asset up with all its warts and foibles and bits and pieces and remaining economic life. Now, the relationship between that and ODRC looks something like this. This is value, and this is, if you like, degree of use. Now, the ODRC value sits up here, okay, so it doesn't really, there's no difference in terms of how intensively it's used or the degree of capacity at which it's utilised. The minimum value for a scheme is something like, well, we generally call it its net realisable value, and it sits down here like that. At the same time, we have another value, which is its enterprise value, which basically increases with intensity of use or degree of use, and we'll call this the DCF value. Now, ODV is a combination of all three of those. Basically what we're saying is the ODV value will never be less than the net realisable value, and it's never going to be more than the ODRC. So the ODRC caps it, because the ODRC value is basically what a well-informed but not over-enthusiastic buyer is going to pay for the assets with their existing level of utilisation and all the rest. Now, if we then say between here and here, you're never going to pay the ODRC value if, on the other hand, you're only using the assets like this. And this is this whole idea of, if you like, marking that ODRC value down. And that's what we do in the process where we're calculating an EV. We're really saying that for an irrigation scheme, it might be here, but the cash flows only support that particular value there. They don't support that value there. So in this case, this is the ODV